What's going on, guys? My name is Nick from Little Guy Racing Parts, and if you're watching this video, chances are you have purchased one of our Complete Builders Kits. Today we are going to be walking you through all the steps that you need to follow in order to completely build one of these kits and get it ready to hit the trail. So we're going to head over to the workbench now and get started on it. The tools that are required to assemble this kit are going to be scissors, needle nose pliers, cutting pliers, 4.0 box driver, 0.50 inch hex driver, 1.5 millimeter hex driver, a micro drill kit with a 1 millimeter and a 3 millimeter drill bit, double-sided mounting tape, AA batteries for the transmitter, a fine tip marker, and a thumbtack. Begin by opening the Complete Builders Kit box. Remove every component from the box until it is completely empty. Lay out all the parts and packages on a clean, well-lit work surface. Keeping each component with its original packaging will make it easier to identify the included hardware throughout the build. For step 2, we're going to be assembling the wheels and tires. For this step, you will need 4 tires, 4 wheels, the included M1.4 by 5 millimeter wheel hardware, and a 1.5 millimeter hex driver. You're going to remove all 4 wheels and tires from their packaging. Each wheel arrives lightly assembled with 2 screws. Remove those screws and separate each wheel into its own 3 main components: front wheel face, rear wheel face, and center beadlock ring. From here, we're going to be installing the center rings. Insert 1 center ring inside each tire. Make sure that the center ring is centered evenly inside the tire before continuing. Repeat this step for all 4 tires. Once all 4 tires have their center ring installed, install the rear wheel face. Insert the rear wheel face into the back of the tire. Lightly pull and work the tire bead around the wheel face until the bead sits evenly and flush around the entire wheel. Once the rear wheel face is installed, then install the front wheel face. You're going to place the front wheel face onto the opposite side of the tire. Again, work the tire bead around the wheel until it is seated evenly and flush against the wheel face. You will then want to rotate and try to align the front and rear wheel faces until all 6 mounting holes are properly aligned with each other. Repeat this process for all 4 wheels before installing the hardware. From here, we are going to install all the wheel hardware. Each wheel uses 6 M1.4 by 5 millimeter screws. Begin installing the screws using a star pattern. Alternating across the wheel allows for the front and rear faces to clamp together evenly. Do not fully tighten the first screw before installing the others. Gradually snug each screw in the star pattern until the wheel is evenly assembled. After all 6 screws are installed, go back around the wheel to confirm that every screw is snug. Do not over-tighten the hardware. These screws are much smaller than full-size automotive hardware and can break or strip if excessive force is used. Repeat the process for the remaining 3 wheels. Once all 4 wheels and tires are assembled, set them aside. They will be used to install later in the build. Moving on to step 3, we are going to prepare the rear axle. For this step, you will need a rear axle, your rear upper link mount, 1 drive shaft, 2 M1.4 by 8 millimeter socket head screws, and an 0.50 inch hex driver. Both included drive shafts are the same 60 millimeter length, so either drive shaft may be used for the front and rear axle. Position the rear upper link mount over the top of the rear axle. It should drop directly into place. Secure the mount using 2 M1.4 by 8 millimeter socket head screws included with the rear axle. Make sure you use these square-edged socket head screws rather than the rounded pan head screws. Tighten both screws until snug. From here, you're going to install the rear drive shaft. Locate the female end of the drive shaft with the logo on it. Back out the drive shaft set screw enough to allow the drive shaft to slide over the rear axle input shaft. Do not completely remove the screw unless necessary. Slide the drive shaft onto the axle input and reinstall or retighten the set screw. Lastly, you're going to remove the supplied wheel nuts that are installed on the axles. Different LGRP wheel nuts are included with the Complete Builders Kit and will be installed later. The rear axle is now prepared for installation. All right, now we're ready for step 4, the assembly of the front axle and its components. For this step, you will need the following: a front Super 8 axle, tremor servo mount, tremor servo horn, the limit strap, front drive shaft, steering links, 4 link balls, 8 O-rings, the included axle and servo hardware, 050-inch hex driver, and a 1.5mm hex driver. We recommend to remove all components from their packaging and organize the hardware before beginning. The limit strap packaging includes 8 bands in multiple sizes. We recommend using the medium size band for this build. Next, install only one of the upper servo screws. Leave the other upper servo screw temporarily out because this will make it easier to install the limit strap band later in the assembly. Now you're going to prepare your steering link balls. You're going to locate 4 link balls and 8 O-rings from the axle hardware package. A simple way to install the O-rings is to place the small side of the link ball onto the end of an 050-inch hex driver. Place an O-ring on the work surface and press the link ball down onto it. The O-rings should pop over the link ball and seat into place. Install 1 O-ring onto each of the 4 link balls. Now you're going to take the longer steering link, feed 1 link ball through the bottom of the driver's side opening and another through the bottom of the passenger side opening. You're going to install a second O-ring onto each link ball to lock them into the steering link. From there, we are going to install the link balls in the short steering link. For the tie rod connection side of the short steering link, position the larger side of the link ball on top. For the end that connects to the servo horn, position the larger side of the link ball toward the servo rather than outward toward the front of the vehicle. Install the second O-ring onto the link ball and secure them down. From here, we are going to connect the steering links now. We're going to place the short steering link on top of the longer steering link. We're going to connect the 2 links using the included 1.4 by 10mm screw and tighten the screw until snug while still allowing the link ball to move freely. Once you've completed the assembly of the steering links, we're going to move over to the front drive shaft. We're going to locate the female drive shaft end with the logo on it. Back out the set screw, slide the drive shaft onto the front axle input shaft, and retighten the set screw. This is going to be a very similar process that you did with the rear axle. Now we're going to install the servo mount. Position the servo assembly on the axle with the servo facing forward. The back of the servo should be on the same side of the axle as the drive shaft. From here, you're going to secure the servo mount to the axle using the 2 included mounting screws. Insert the screws from the front side of the axle and tighten them until snug. Now that our servo is completely mounted onto the axle, we're going to move back to the installation of the steering link onto the axle. You're going to attach the driver's side of the long steering link to the driver's side steering knuckle from the top using an M1.4 by 10mm screw. Repeat the same process for the passenger side. Confirm that the steering link moves freely and does not bind. Once you have confirmed that, we are going to move ahead and install the servo horn on the steering link. Attach the short steering link to the servo horn using a 1.4 by 8mm screw. Install the screw from the back side of the horn into the lower or second hole position shown in the video. When properly installed, only a small amount of thread should be visible from the front side of the servo horn. Press the servo horn onto the servo output temporarily. Do not install the center servo horn screw yet. The servo must first be powered on and centered later in the build. That front axle assembly is now ready to be installed. Moving on to step 5, we are going to assemble the transmission and the motor. For this step, you will need the transmission, the brushless motor, 2 remaining drive shaft ends, the included M1.5 motor hardware, and an appropriate hex driver. From here, you're going to position the motor against the side of the transmission with the opening gear casing. Secure the motor to the transmission using the included M1.5 hardware. Do not over-tighten the motor screws. Install 1 remaining drive shaft end onto each transmission output shaft. Back out each set screw. Slide the drive shaft end completely onto the output shaft and retighten the set screw. The completed transmission assembly should now include an installed brushless motor, front drive shaft output, and rear drive shaft output. Set the transmission assembly aside as it is ready for installation. Moving on to step 6, we are going to be tuning the shocks. This shock modification is optional, but it is the setup we recommend and use on our in-house builds. Customers who do not want to cut the springs may want to skip this section. For this step, you will need 4 shocks, 2 additional black springs, needle nose pliers, and cutting pliers. The shocks arrive with the black springs installed. We recommend leaving 2 springs uncut and storing them in a package as spares. In order to remove the springs, we are going to use the needle nose pliers and lightly hold the shock shaft. Be extremely careful to not scratch or damage the shaft. Unscrew the lower shock end and remove the spring. Repeat as needed for the remaining 3 shocks. From here, we are going to cut the springs. 2 full-length springs will be cut in half to create 4 shorter springs. Hold the spring with the tightly wound or coil bucket end facing to the right. Count 7 coils from the right side and cut the spring at the center point demonstrated in the video. Each full-length spring should produce 2 shorter springs. We're now going to reinstall those springs we just made. We're going to install 1 shortened spring onto each shock. The cut end of the spring must be facing upward toward the top shock cap. Do not place the cut end against the lower spring retainer. Reinstall the lower shock end and repeat the process for all 4 shocks. Once this is completed, set the shocks aside. All right, now moving on to step number 7. I know we're kind of all over the place, but it'll all make sense shortly here, I promise you that. We're going to prepare the body hinge. The hinge kit packaging depends on which body option was selected. The process shown in this video uses the brawler body. For this step, you will need body side hinge, chassis side hinge plate, the bumper, and 2 M1.4 by 8mm socket head screws. Align the chassis side hinge plate with the body side hinge. Install 1 M1.4 by 8mm screw on each side and tighten both screws until snug. Set the completed hinge assembly aside with the rear bumper and its remaining hardware. Alright, now we're going to dive into step 8, which is probably going to be the longest step, and that's going to be the comp frame kit. We're going to start by organizing it though. So we're going to open the comp frame kit packaging and lay out all the components. An assembly diagram is included with the frame kit. Keep this diagram nearby and reference it throughout the assembly as it will definitely help. The frame kit includes several duplicate or optional components, including spare body posts, spare spacers, optional shock mounting components, and a long bed X-Factor hinge component. If you're building an X-Factor long bed body, you will use the hinge kit included in the frame. For a short bed X-Factor body or a brawler body, you're going to set this long bed hinge component aside and save them for a possible future body change. You will not need it for this assembly. You may work directly from the hardware bags or carefully empty the hardware onto an organized work surface. Step number 9, we are going to assemble the suspension links. For this step, you will need all the suspension links, the link balls, the O-rings, and 1.5mm hex driver. Place the small side of the link ball onto a 1.5mm hex driver, kind of like we did for the steering links. You're going to press one O-ring onto the larger end of each link ball. Feed the link balls through the openings in the suspension links and install the second O-ring on the opposite side. A quick link ball orientation is that for all the bent links, the link ball orientation is not critical. But for the straight links, the larger sides of the link balls must face opposite directions. In other words, when the larger side of one link ball faces one direction, the large side on the opposite end of the same link must face the reverse direction. Set the completed links aside in their front and rear groups. Moving on to step number 10, we are going to be installing the shock towers. You're going to need to identify the front and rear of each frame rail. The shorter end with 2 screw holes is the front. The longer end with 4 screw holes is the rear. Slide the shock towers onto the frame rails. The thicker side of each shock tower mounting section should face the inside of the chassis. The thinner side should face outwards. When recommending rear shock tower position, we recommend to position the rear shock tower so that the one frame rail hole remains visible behind the shock tower. You're going to position the front shock tower so that one frame rail hole remains visible in the front of the shock tower. Repeat the same placement on the second frame rail, making sure that both sides match. Now, step 11, you're going to want to mount the transmission to the skid plate. For this step, you will need the completed transmission assembly we already worked on. You're going to need a skid plate, and you're going to need M 1.4 by 5mm socket head screws. The transmission will only fit correctly on the skid plate in one orientation. Position the transmission on the skid plate and align the mounting holes. Secure the transmission using 2 screws through the bottom of the skid plate and 1 screw through the upper side mounting point. Use M 1.4 by 5mm socket head screws for these locations. Tighten all 3 screws until snug. For step 12, we're going to be installing the frame rails onto the skid plate. The motor must face toward the front of the chassis. Position 1 frame rail on each side of the skid plate. Secure each frame rail using a M 1.4 by 5mm screw per side. Before continuing, I want you to confirm that the motor is facing forward. The skid plate sits flat along the bottom edge of both frame rails, and both frame rails are even and parallel. The assembled wheels and tires can be used as temporary supports while working on the frame. Moving on to step 13, we're going to install the rear support tray. We're going to position the rear support tray between the frame rails and the shock towers, the rear shock towers to be specific. We're going to align the tray so that 2 frame rail holes remain visible on each side behind it. Use the 2 forward mounting holes in this area. You're going to secure the tray using M 1.4 by 5mm screws on both sides. Make sure that the tray sits flat and evenly between the frame rails. Step 14 is going to be to install the battery tray and strap. The kit includes 2 battery straps. One is used for the build and the second one is just a spare. Feed the battery strap upward through the bottom of the battery support. Loop the strap around and connect the hook and loop material. You're going to position the battery support between the frame rails directly in front of the motor and secure it using M 1.4 by 5mm screws, 2 screws on the driver's side and 2 screws on the passenger side. For step 15, we are going to be installing the shock tower braces. The rear shock tower brace is what we're going to start with. We're going to install this brace between the rear shock towers. We're going to use M 1.4mm screws in the 2 forward holes and M 1.4 by 5mm screws in the 2 rear holes. Front shock tower brace, we're going to do very similar setup, but we're going to use all 1.4 by 5mm screws. So two screws on the driver's side and 2 screws on the passenger side. Tighten all the brace hardware until snug. For step 16, we're going to move over to electronics. We're going to be installing the ESC and receiver onto the frame. For this step, you will need the ESC, the receiver, which will be in the radio box, the included receiver mounting tape, an additional double-sided tape or hook and loop tape for the ESC. Velcro also works great. The receiver is located inside the radio package like mentioned. You will see the radio instruction manual, troubleshooting information, and a bind plug. You're going to prepare the receiver. You're going to apply the included double-sided tape evenly on the back of the receiver. Preparing the ESC. The ESC does not include chassis mounting tape. You're going to have to use your own double-sided mounting tape, hook and loop tape, Velcro, or another secure mounting method. When you're mounting the ESC, which you're going to mount first, you're going to position it on the rear support tray. You're going to push it all the way back against the rear shock tower brace. It's essentially going to be touching. Push it back against the rear shock tower brace. The ESC power switch should be faced on the passenger side. Press firmly and secure the ESC down on the platform. For the receiver, we're going to position the receiver directly in front of and against the ESC. The receiver ports should face the driver's side. Press firmly to secure the receiver to the center section support. Press firmly to secure the receiver to the center support section. For a clean installation, route the receiver antenna through the rear shock tower brace seen in the video. For step 17, we're going to begin electronics wiring. Wire routing can be adjusted based on personal preference. The following method is how we recommend organizing the included electronics, but you can do it however you want, of course. We're going to start by twisting the motor wires together neatly and connect them to the ESC. We're then going to take the ESC receiver lead and twist that to remove excess slack. We're then going to connect the included male 2-pin JST battery extension to the ESC battery connector. Do not connect the battery yet. From here, we're going to move over to step 18 and we're going to install the rear suspension links. We're going to turn the chassis upside down and we're going to locate the two longer straight links. There's going to be shorter ones and longer ones. We need the longer ones right now for the rear. On the side of the chassis, there are 6 link mounting holes arranged as 3 upper and 3 lower positions. With the chassis upside down, install the rear upper link hardware through the middle hole of the upper row. Use one 1.4 by 10 millimeter screw per side. You're going to slide the link onto the screw with the larger side of the link ball facing inward towards the drive shaft. Secure each screw using the included small nuts in your kit. A needle nose pliers come in really handy and are recommended for holding the nuts while tightening the screws. You're then going to install the rear lower links. So you're going to position the rear lower links between the frame rails and the skid plate. Make sure that the LGRP logos are faced outward. The bends are positioned for maximum ground clearance. Both links match from side to side, and secure the links using 1.4 by 10 millimeter screws. These screws are going to be screwed into the skid plate. For step 19, we're going to install the rear axle now that all our links are set up. We're going to position the rear axle beneath the chassis. We're going to phase the rear drive shaft, which is very important. You're going to connect the rear axle drive shaft to the transmission drive shaft. The drive shaft set screw heads must face in the same direction. For example, if the axle side set screw faces downward, the transmission side set screw must also face downward. Matching the drive shaft orientation helps prevent binding and uneven operation. We're then going to attach the rear upper links to the rear upper link mount using M 1.4 by 8 millimeter screw on each side. We're going to connect the rear lower links by bringing the rear lower links down to the axle mounting positions. We're going to secure each lower link using an M 1.4 by 10 millimeter screw. Once you have done both of these, we're going to confirm that all 4 rear links are attached to the axle and moves freely. For step 20, we are going to install the front suspension links. It's going to be a very similar process to what we experienced. We're going to locate the 2 remaining straight links. We're going to install them into the middle hole of the upper row of the chassis link mounting positions. You're going to use the M1.4 by 10 millimeter screw per side. Position the larger side of each link ball inward towards the drive shaft, like the rear. We're going to secure each screw using the included nut. From there, we're going to install the front lower links. We're going to position the front lower links between the frame rails and the skid plate in the same manner as the rear links. Use M1.4 by 10 millimeter hardware and confirm that the link bends and logos are correctly oriented like the rear. Now moving to the front axle, we're going to feed the servo wire upward through the chassis as demonstrated in the video. We're going to do the same thing by phasing the front drive shafts. The set screw heads on both drive shaft sections must face the same direction. In the video example, both set screws face upward. We're then going to connect the front upper links. We're going to attach the front upper links to the middle mounting hole of the 3 available positions on the servo mount. Use one M1.4 by 8 millimeter screw per side. Then you're going to connect the front lower links. Bring both front lower links down to the axle mounting points. You're going to secure them with M1.4 by 10 millimeter screws. And at this point, all front and rear links should be installed and both drive shafts should be properly phased. Moving on to step 22, we're going to be completing the electronics wiring. Begin by routing the servo wire alongside the motor wire. Wrap or loop the servo wire neatly around the motor wire as it travels towards the receiver. Once most of the slack has been removed, twist the remaining servo wire and connect it to channel 1 of the receiver. Route the ESC receiver lead beneath the motor and servo wiring. Connect the ESC lead to channel 2 of the receiver. Confirm the plug orientation before powering the vehicle. Step 23 is going to be center the servo and install the servo horn. Like I mentioned before, we haven't fully mounted the servo horn to the servo, and this is exactly why. You're going to turn the transmitter on first. You're going to connect the vehicle battery and then power on the ESC. Allow the steering servo to move to its natural or centered position. You're going to confirm that the steering trim on the transmitter is centered. Then you're going to carefully pull the servo horn off the servo without rotating the servo output. Then you're going to reposition the horn so that the wheels and the steering linkage are as centered as possible. You're going to press the horn back onto the centered servo. You're going to use the black center screw included with the servo horn and a 1.5 millimeter hex driver to permanently screw the servo horn. Tighten until snug without over tightening, and test the steering in both directions to confirm that the linkage moves freely. After that's completed, we're going to move on to step 24. We're going to install the front body post mount. We're going to position the front body post mounting plate to the front shock tower brace. It's going to be secured by 4 1.4 by 5 millimeter screws, and we're going to tighten the hardware evenly. Leading right into step 25, we're going to be installing the limit strap band and the body post to that body post mount. You're going to begin installing the body post using only one of its 2 M1.4 by 5 millimeter mounting screws. You're going to leave the body post pivoted or opened toward the front of the chassis. This provides access for installing the limit strap band. The limit strap band can be slightly difficult to install, so work slowly and use some patience. You're going to hook one end of the medium-sized band onto the rear hook of the limit strap. You're going to feed the band over the body post mount, loop it around the mount, and hook the opposite end onto the front hook of the limit strap. Once both ends of the bands are secured, Install the final upper servo mount screw that was left out earlier. This locks the limit strap into its final position and allows you to rotate the body post back into its correct orientation and install the second M1.4 by 5mm body post screw. The following components are now fully assembled: the servo, servo mount, limit strap band, body post mount, and body post. For step 26, we're going to be installing the shocks. For this step, you will need 4 prepared shocks, 4 shock spacers, and the included shock hardware. Before installation, confirm that the larger side of each shock link ball faces outwards. You're going to feed the shock hardware through the upper shock link ball. You're going to place 1 spacer between the shock and the shock tower. Spacers are only used at the upper shock mounts. The recommendation for front shock position is to use the forward row of holes on the shock tower, and you're going to mount the shock 1 hole down from the very top. For the lower shock mount, you're going to attach the lower end of the shock directly to the axle mounting location. The recommended rear shock position is actually the same exact setup, so you're going to use the front row of holes on the rear shock tower, and you're going to mount the shock 1 hole down from the very top. After all 4 shocks are installed, compress the suspension and confirm that it moves smoothly without binding. Step 27 is to assemble and install the rock sliders. For this step, you will need driver's side rock slider, passenger side rock slider, the 2 rock slider extensions, 4 M1.4 by 5mm screws, the remaining 1.4 by 8mm mounting screws, and from here we're going to start installing. So we're going to begin threading 2 1.4 by 5mm screws into each rock slider. Do not fully tighten them yet. You're going to want to align the correct extension with each slider. The extensions are side specific and will only fit correctly in one orientation. Once aligned, you're going to want to finish tightening those screws. Then we're going to move into installing the rock sliders on the chassis. We're going to position each rock slider at the center of its frame rail. The flatter end of the slider faces forward. The more pointed end faces the rear of the vehicle. Use the video for reference here. It's really hard to explain, but you'll understand as soon as you see what I'm talking about. You're going to secure each slider using 2 1.4 by 8mm screws. Confirm that both sliders are installed at the same height and orientation. Step 28 is going to be installing the front bumper. This one is pretty straightforward. You're going to position the front bumper between the front ends of the frame rails. The front bumper uses 2 different screw lengths. So what you're going to do is you're going to use a 1.4 by 4mm screw in the 2 front mounting holes. And then on the back 2 mounting holes, you're going to be using a 1.4 by 5mm screw. You're going to install the 2 screws per side for the total of 4 screws. You're going to tighten all the hardware evenly and confirm that the bumper is centered. For step 29, you're going to install the hex adapters, wheels, and tires. For this step, you're going to need the 4 assembled wheels and tires, 4 hex adapters, 4 axle cross pins, the LGRP branded nylock locking wheel nuts, included wheel nut tool, and a 4.0mm box driver. You're going to install 1 cross pin through the opening on each axle stub shaft. You're going to align the slot in each hex adapter with the cross pin and slide the adapter onto the axle. You're going to place the wheel onto the hex adapter. You're going to thread the LGRP wheel nut onto the axle. From there, you're going to place the included wheel nut tool onto the nut and use the 4.0mm box driver to tighten it. Tighten the wheel nut until secure, but confirm that the wheel still rotates freely. Repeat the process for the remaining 3 wheels. The vehicle should now sit on its own weight. All right, step 30, we're getting close. We're going to prepare the body. The body installation process is similar for all 3 body options. This video demonstrates the brawler body. So for this step, you're going to need the selected body, the rear bumper, the completed rear hinge assembly, body clips, a 1mm drill bit, a 3mm drill bit, a micro drill kit or similar tool, a fine tip marker, a thumbtack or alignment pin, and the body mounting hardware. If you purchased a clear body, we recommend completing all the paintwork before mounting the body. Pre-painted bodies can proceed directly to installation. For step 31, we're going to drill and install the rear bumper. You're going to center the rear bumper against the rear of the body and hold the bumper firmly in position. Using the bumper mounting holes as a guide, you're going to drill the first hole with the 1mm drill bit. You're going to insert the thumbtack through the first drilled hole and bumper. This helps hold the bumper in its exact position while drilling the second hole. Drill the second mounting hole using a 1mm drill bit. From here, we're going to attach the rear hinge. We're going to position the completed rear hinge assembly inside the body. You're going to install two 1.4 by 5mm screws through the rear bumper and body into the hinge assembly. Use one screw on each side. Tighten carefully until the bumper and hinge are secure against the body. Step 32 is going to be attaching the body to the chassis. Position the body and rear hinge assembly at the back of the chassis. You're going to align the hinge plate with the rear chassis mounting points. You're going to secure the hinge to the chassis using four 1.4 by 5mm screws, 2 on the driver's side and 2 on the passenger side. Confirm that the body pivots upward and downward smoothly on the hinge. The rear of the body is now attached to the vehicle. Step 33, we are going to drill the front body post hole. Lower the body over the chassis. You're going to make sure that the body is centered from side to side, sitting straight on the chassis, properly aligned with the wheels, and fully seated against the rear hinge. You're going to push the body gently against the front body post. Use a fine tip marker to mark the exact center of the body post. You're going to raise the body and drill a small pilot hole using a 1mm drill bit. You're then going to enlarge the pilot hole using a 3mm drill bit. Work slowly to prevent cracking and damaging of the body. You're then going to lower the body back over the post and confirm that the hole is properly aligned. You're going to secure the body using the included body clips. From here, your complete builder's kit is officially completed and ready to hit the trail. Be sure to do a full bolt check on your car before you take it out for your first drive, and just do an overall and make sure that everything looks proper, is tightened and secure. Alrighty, that is going to conclude the assembly process for your complete builder's kit by Little Guy Racing Parts. If you guys have any additional questions or concerns, please reach out to us through our contact page on our website, or you can email us at littleguyracingparts@gmail.com. Thank you for your support and watching this video. I hope this video was able to help you get your rig on the trail, and we will catch you in the next video.